Hey, welcome on this week's episode of I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members. We're interviewing an executive director. She's certainly at CEO level, Isabel Garcia, the executive director for the Redlands Christian Migrant Association, better known as RCMA. It is a large organization, 1,600 employees, over $100 million in 21 counties in Florida. She started in the fields. Now she's the CEO. Enjoy this podcast. All right, on this week's episode of I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, as you heard in the introduction, I'm interviewing a friend of mine, Isabel Garcia, who is the executive director of RCMA, and she's going to explain what RCMA is. But Isabel, to get the audience a little bit familiar with you, would you just share a little bit about your background, your history, and how you became the executive director for RCMA?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. So this is really an honor and excited to be able to share a little bit about RCMA. Um, as you mentioned, I am Isabel Garcia. I'm the executive director for RCMA. And I think what makes my background unique is that my upbringing has been from a humble background of families who pick agriculture and work out in the field picking the crops. I was a first college graduate from our farm worker family, and I came to RCMA 35 years ago. Started out as an after school teacher, and 35 years later, I'm here as the executive director, actually still providing and serving the families that we continue to see in these rural communities that need quality education. And so I am very proud to be a part of this organization that not is it's not just a job for me, but it really is a passion because of the education that we know children need. And once they get a high quality education, you know that you'll have successful kids in our communities. I am one of those kids. Like I said, I feel like I earned my degree because of working here at RCMA. And if it wasn't because of the professional development opportunities and the educational supports that I received, I don't think I'd be today as an executive director. I feel again, I feel like I'm very honored to be in this role because of so many different supports that I've received throughout my life.
Well, you are so humble, and it's quite a story. And in fact, for the audience, you and I met at Leadership Florida. That's how we first, there was a connection there, as in I had an opportunity to work with your organization on a consulting basis. But and everything else, you are also a graduate of Leadership Florida, which is an honor in and of itself. But explain to the audience, this is no small job you have as executive director. The Redlands Christian Migrant Association is not small. It's complex. So share with the audience a little bit about the size of the organization, the services, the clients, the employees. Give us an understanding of the scope of what you are leading.
Oh, definitely. As you mentioned, RCMA is not no it is a local community organization, but it really expands throughout the entire state of Florida. RCMA has been around for 60 years. We're going to celebrate our 60th anniversary. And we started out by providing childcare to farm workers whose children were in the field and we wanted to keep them safe. And so from that day in 1965 to today, we are in 21 counties throughout the state of Florida. We service about 5,000 children on a daily basis. What makes our CMA is unique that we are in rural communities, and the population that we serve are rural, poor, low income families who live in the communities that we serve. We are servicing early childhood education, 0 to 5-year-old, and I also do 3 charter schools. We have kindergarten through 8th grade, and our charter schools are dual language schools. We employ about 1,600 employees, and we actually our budget is about 100 million, and we get majority of our funding from federal and state because a lot of the services we provide are comprehensive services. Not only do we focus on education, we also focus on equipping families with the resources that they need so that they can be able to navigate a medical home, a dental home, to be able to get the children the services they need in their communities, connect them to community resources that they need for their own well-being. But we are a statewide organization, and we do have about 55 child development centers, as I mentioned. We also have partnerships with local childcare providers, and we also do family childcare homes. So that is a large organization.
And I hope everybody heard 1,600 employees and over $100 million annual budget. This is no small organization, and you rose literally as a client at one point, and now you're leading that. What a fantastic story! Now, Isabel, y'all are structured as a nonprofit, and this podcast is geared towards nonprofit board members. Describe how you have set up your board of directors. How do y'all interact? How do you all meet? Just give a little bit of landscape of how you structured it, because it is so vast. You're covering 21 counties.
Mhm. So as I mentioned, I grew up within RCMA, so I inherited our current board structure that is evolving. And one of the things that has always been very intentional about our board is having representation in the many different counties that we serve. So we do have a large board. Sometimes it can span up to 31 board members, because what also makes our board unique is that we add parents on our board, because it's really important to have the voice of the families as well. So our goal is to try to continue to represent each county. We also know how important it is to have a certain skill set. So when we're looking for new board members, or we're evolving or expanding our board, or as we're recruiting new board members, we look at folks that have an interest in the work that we do, serving a rural poor population. We look at diversity. We look at a skill set in finance, in legal, in early childhood, in education, higher education. So everything that we feel is what we are responsible for as an organization, complying with our funders, we make sure that those board members as well represent an expertise that can help us continue to lead this organization and be accountable, and be also um, compliant with what the funders require. The other thing that is also unique about our board is because we strongly believe in partnerships, we also bring on people from the health field. We also bring in a lot of growers who themselves employ a lot of the families that work in the field in farm work. So we also have board members that know the landscape of farming and agriculture. So we also have growers that have been on our board. Um, and so we continue to look at what is the best way to continue to lead this organization, because as an executive director, it I feel like the partnership with the board and your board chair is really what helps us all be successful. We all have to be on the same page. We all have to be communicating, and we also all need to know where is that line of the day-to-day and the governing proportion. And I feel like we're I'm only going 5 years in this role. My board chair is going on 2 years, and we're continuing to define that partnership that helps us both lead a board and an agency to another 50 years beyond us, because that's really what it's about, is continuing to build an institution that continues to educate children in these rural poor communities.
Well, and I hope the audience hears you always tie it back to the kids and the mission. That's fantastic. But your intentionality about building and structuring the board, you and your board chair, very intentional to have that representation, all types of representation, even having clients, beneficiaries serve on the board, which is very unique. A lot of people talk about it, organizations talk about it, but I know you all live that out. That gives you the lived experience when y'all are making the decisions you all need to make. So I commend you for that. 31's big, but you almost need it. I mean, just because you're so vast, just your geographic coverage.
And I'd like to add to that, that even really celebrate the success of, like you mentioned, our clients or our constituents. We actually have also 3 board members that were RCMA alumni, that they attended a center when they were little. and they're part of our board now. And they're, you have one that is in HR, you have another one that is in family law. And these are success stories that we know because of the quality education that we provided. Now they have careers, and now they're giving back to the families and the organization by being on our board as a volunteer. So I want to also emphasize that even having them as alumni and being one of the recipients of the services is a testament to how important quality education is, especially in the rural communities that we serve.
Oh, yeah, and they serve as great role models because the kids can see it. They can aspire. Through education, you really can accomplish anything. I've heard you say that. So I'm curious. You said that you get funding from the state and the federal government, and I hear that's very unique from a reporting and a governance perspective. Does a board need to be aware? Are there unique aspects to getting federal funding that the board needs to be involved in, or do they stay away from that?
No, there's definitely regulations and rules that governing bodies must meet when it comes to federal or state funding. And so what we do is we're very intentional about providing a board orientation that gives an overview of those federal rules and regulations. One example is that we must have somebody representing early childhood, or we must have somebody who has a legal background. So there is some requirements to some of the federal and state funding that we receive that also guide what type of board members and what skill set we're supposed to have on the board. Most definitely, it was the state funding. We have to follow sunshine law. So that also guides a lot of the work and the reporting that has to come at every board meeting, and then how often we meet as a board.
Very interesting. Sunshine, the law that everybody loves to hate, right? But it does offer that transparency, which is so critically important, especially when you get those federal dollars. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now let's talk a little bit about you as CEO. You've got a large organization, 1,600 employees. You said, what are some of your biggest challenges as the executive director, the CEO?
First and foremost, what I feel is my challenge, or that I feel like I need as a CEO, and then sometimes because of the magnitude of the organization in our geography, I don't get as much time with staff and parents. I don't get to get out in the field like I used to when I was in program. So which is what drives your heart. And so the challenge is making sure that children and families know that I am here for them. I am their voice. I am one of them. I miss those opportunities. Um, Other than that, I think the other challenge is continuing to really build that, like, a line of communication between myself, the governing body, and the programs, and making sure that we're always communicating our strategic plan, our strategic goals, and inspiring and providing that leadership messaging that you need to give, and reassurance to the field. I think that that's the challenge, because sometimes because we're federal and state funded, sometimes our attention can be diverted in so much into compliance that we forget to look at the compassionate piece and say, no, wait, you're doing an excellent job. Let's celebrate the successes that we have, such as accredited centers. We have an A and B school. We have outstanding teachers that are earning degrees. Let's not forget to celebrate the quality. Our children are progressing. Children are showing outcomes where they are learning. And so those are the pieces that to me is challenging, to come back and say, let's celebrate those little things that really are happening, and not let the compliance drive our priorities.
Oh, well stated. And I hope the audience is watching this on video, because your eyes lit up when you started talking about the outcomes and people getting an education and teachers going back to school and getting their degrees. So clearly you're passionate about it. And we can get bogged down in the day-to-day and the governance and the compliance if we're not careful. So I'm sure you're out just always advocating those celebrations. So how have you structured, getting a little bit into structure, you've got a leadership team. How have you structured it to allow them to do their work, you to provide oversight and do your job? Just curious how you've done that.
Because we are statewide, we do have regions. And so every region, we have a south, a north, and a central region. And every region has a regional team that has an area of expertise, like in early childhood and family and administration. And every region team is actually responsible for the oversight and day to day and monitoring of our early childhood programs. And the schools actually have a charter school leadership team as well, and they're responsible for the day to day monitoring. And the people that I supervise are more executive level, C-level staff, and I meet with them on a weekly basis so that we can continue to communicate and know, share information and report back and how things are going. And we are the ones who continue to work towards implementing our strategic goals and our reporting and all those things, the fun things that are not so fun. But I do have a C-level suite team that reports to me, and then they report, the regional teams and the charter leadership teams report to them. And then every center and every school has a direct supervisor on site, a principal and a center coordinator who do the day-to-day at the site. That's why we have over 1,600 employees.
Boy, I know it's very labor intensive. And so, did you, at some point in your career, were you in every one of those roles that you just described?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was a after school teacher, I was a cook, I was a bus driver, I was a director, I was a training coordinator. I was in every position that there could possibly be in RCMA. Yes.
And you know them all, and I'm sure that's a
Yeah.
blessing on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, oh wait, I got some advice, but I can't give you that advice. You need to get that from your supervisor, not me.
Yes, right.
too, good- too good. So, vast organization, communication is always a challenge in any organization. How do you ensure there's strong lines of communication between you, the leadership team, and even the entire organization?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I do have weekly meetings with my direct reports, and we check in with each other, share what's happening. But I think also we have management team meetings where you have more little management teams come together, and we hold an annual also management team retreat with them that I'm present at. And then we, because we are federally funded, we do have two parent groups that we call policy council, and so I try to attend policy council so that I can also communicate with parents any federal rules or regulations or things that are happening. And then for the rest of our CMA, we have what we call a monthly PALS webinar. And that is basically everybody in the field can get on the call and we report business. We report, and I make sure that I try to get on every monthly call so at least I can say hello, give an inspiring message, and then share, the successes that we're going through and communicate with so that the staff can say they see me, they feel me. We do have an annual board meeting where we recognize all the employees for their years of service. 15 plus, we have staff that are celebrating 45 years of being with RCMA. And so that's another opportunity that I have. The other thing that I do is I do send out uh, newsletters and emails to the field with a monthly message. So we just try to find every possible avenue to take advantage of email, social media, meetings, and webinars to be able to connect and continue to share the message of what's happening in the current state of RCMA.
Wow, I can imagine it's an ongoing challenge, but it sounds like you do quite a bit, and you're very intentional about it. I'm curious. You mentioned that you all are in many communities. You had 55 or 65 centers. How do you all get involved or engaged in the communities? I know this is probably a little bit removed from you, but in the past you did that, and I know y'all are heavily embedded in these communities. How do you go about doing it in your work?
You're right. I think every center is very well connected within their community. every center locally is involved with community agency and community events. And so that happens in the community because, again, we've been around, we're going on 60 years. And so there's long time relationships that have been established. We also are very intentional about having agreements or like memorandum of understanding, like the local school districts for children who are transitioning to kindergarten. We have a memorandum of understanding with the local health clinic so that we can refer children for medical or dental services. And all of those require that one-on-one relationship at the local level. We have relationships with Healthy Start, Healthy Families, because everything that we're doing is like bringing that resource to that child and that family again for their medical and well-being. And so at the local level, you can go to every center. They have their own culture and their own partnerships. But when you go to every RCMA center or school, you will see the same level of passionate staff educating children and also passionate staff engaging and communicating with their local agencies. Um, that's how that's how we I guess it's just I would say it's just a natural thing for us. It really naturally happens. People know of RCMA and you get a call and say, "Oh, I want to volunteer at RCMA. Oh, can RCMA benefit from this resource?" You have families or donors that are giving jackets right now and giving blankets because they know that the families and children could benefit from it. And RCMA turns around and gives it right to the children and the family. So you have community partners that just reach out to say, "Could you benefit from this?" During disasters like the hurricanes, we are one of the agencies that immediately get a call from local partners and says, "What happened? How are your families? How can we help?" And we immediately get donations, distribution of water, food, and supplies because they know that RCMA is very well connected in the communities. And you will see this in every county, in every community you go. You see it, and it's a testament of our long-standing relationship and reputation that we have in serving and providing to the children and families there.
Well, that certainly is special. I also say it's a testament to you, your leadership team, and recognizing how critically important it is for you all to remain embedded in the communities. Although, like you said, I don't think you know any other way of doing it. It's cultural. It's just how you have done it for 60 years. So you don't know any other way, which is interesting for you.
It's just how we do business.
Yeah, how you.
Yes.
I love that. Last couple questions, maybe the last question. So you've been CEO, executive director for 5 years now. What do you miss most now that you've moved into that role?
I mean, because I am so far removed from programming that it does, you do slowly start losing that connection, which really was what was driving you. And sometimes I do sit back and say, "Oh gosh," even for myself, I feel like I'm not inspiring enough. But it's because I'm not feeling inspired. So I have to continue to look for that. We call it in Spanish, that mística, buscar esa mística that gives you that passion and why you're doing what you're doing. Um, you're just more far removed from that. And I think that when you're that connected to the children and families and what you do, this job just, becomes harder to deal with because of the compliance and accountability and the expectations on you. The expectations on you. You know that you're the role model. You feel like you have to show that work-life balance, but the reality in the role as a CEO or executive director is really difficult. It's easier said than done. People say take care of yourself. People say, disconnect or, find that work-life balance. It's hard in the role as a CEO to find that work-life balance.
So, Isabel, this has been an incredible conversation. You're such a role model. You've done so well. What advice would you have to anybody out there, maybe work in the fields like you did, maybe at one of your education centers now, one of those kids that look up to you? What advice would you give to them?
Continue your education. Work on your credentials. Work on getting a degree because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, that belongs to you. Nobody can ever take that away from you. You work for it, you earned it, and you be proud of it.
Isabel Garcia, Executive Director for Redlands Christian Migrant Association. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing your story and sharing your role as a leader.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
All right, now we have Recapping with Reed. Reed listened in on the interview. Reed, what are your 3 takeaways?
My first takeaway is about the board members that they recruit. They recruit both board members who have expertise in the fields that they need and representation of their beneficiaries.
That's exactly right. And that is actually a great model. That's really good governance. Number 2.
She didn't say this directly, but when she was talking about the regulations, the federal regulations the board has to comply to, it made me think, before you join a board, ask those questions. Be aware of what you may or may not have to comply to based off the type of board, the type of organization that you're joining the board for.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to understand those responsibilities before you jump into it. And number 3.
With an organization the size of hers, they have to take advantage of every single form of communication. Newsletter, social media, one-on-one meetings, group meetings, webinars, they do everything. So if you're part of an organization that big, make sure you are taking advantage of every single form of communication.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, Recapping with Reed, his 3 takeaways from our interview with Isabel Garcia. And you know how I end it. We will I-501 see you next week.